Hello, welcome to Wood Fired Weekly at Manna from Devon Cooking School. This week we are going to be looking in some detail at shaping, topping, baking pizza. How to get the oven right, how to get the dough right, how to do the toppings, all of those little details which go into making the perfect pizza. Last week we made the dough, or talked about how to make the dough and all of those ins and outs, so we're not going to cover that in great detail this time. We consider that to have been done. What I do need to talk about is how to go from dough to dough ball. And a dough ball is what we're going to use to make our pizza. In my tub here, I have some I made earlier. I actually made this dough yesterday, shaped it into dough balls this morning. It's been sat here for about 6 hours, so now the dough should be nice and relaxed, as well as very nicely fermented for nearly 18 hours. I took a piece of dough weighing 180 grams, like that, and shaped it into a dough ball. I could have done that fairly sort of slowly, like that. That would shape it into a dough ball. I could do it in two hands and tuck it under like that to do it in the dough ball. My preferred way of doing it is to have it on the table, roll it, keep my fingers curled over the top, roll it around nicely. My fingers are sort of tucking in the underside and the palm of my hand is smoothing things out. The trouble with this dough ball is I've just put a load of energy into it. If I now try and shape this dough ball, it will have a huge amount of elasticity. So I try and stretch it out and it just bounces back. Great. That means I've got a really strong and elastic dough, which is exactly what I want. What I don't want is for it to be this resistance. So what I must do is let it relax. So I can make these dough balls 6, 8, 12 hours in advance and put them somewhere really cold, fridge, refrigerated room, or just a very cold place, and let them relax slowly. Or I can shape them and put them somewhere warm and they'll be ready in an hour or so. But really, if I think they'll be ready in much less than an hour, I'm going to get into trouble because I find they're just springing back all the time. And if I force them out against their will, we might find that they spring back when they go into the oven. So I put a big pizza in the oven and a little pizza comes out and everybody thinks I've been a bit mean, when in fact the dough balls are all the same size because they're all at 180 grams. So very importantly, make your dough balls in advance, put them in a box, make sure it's kind of airtight so that they don't dry out and form a crust. If you look closely at these, you'll see they haven't formed any crust on the top. They've risen and they've spread out and they've softened and they've relaxed, but they haven't formed any crust. That means they're nice and ready to shape. So I tend to use a lot of flour when I'm shaping. Some people like to use semolina. If you use semolina, it kind of forms a nice outer coating on the pizza, which goes quite crispy, and you get a different texture on the outside, more of a sort of chewy, crispy texture. Entirely a matter of choice. So I'm going to take one of these dough balls and carefully take it out of the tray so that I don't completely distort it or don't re-energize it by mangling it up. A little bit more flour and we're ready to shape. So once I start kind of shaping, things need to happen relatively quickly. So I want to make sure that my oven is ready once I've topped the pizza and the pizza is ready to go in the oven. And by ready, I mean we've got a nice hot floor, 350 minimum temperature, ideally, 400 degree absolute maximum temperature, somewhere in the middle of there would be great. So 365, 375, that would be a perfect temperature. And I've got 354 there, 370 over there, 390 right in the middle, so we're definitely in the right ballpark. Too far below 350, and the base of the pizza is not going to cook quickly. It's going to all take much longer. If I've got the top of the oven right but the floor wrong, then I cook the top. The top looks great, but the underside is still doughy. The base of the pizza isn't cooked. And then the oven, we want to be sitting at no Mississippis. Not quite. And that means I need the oven to be nicely heated up. So if I've got a big oven like this, that means I've got to have reached a point where it's at least stable. And that means a nice clear dome, so no soot, all the soot has burned off, and I've definitely got that. I'm also going to need a decent bed of embers to keep the oven up at temperature, and to get really up to that no Mississippi point, I need a bright fire burning. And you can see there I've got one log kind of tickling away. That's obviously not doing enough, so I need to add a couple more bits of wood. And I have these bits of wood ready to go. They're reasonably small. If I put one big piece of wood on, it won't do the business. Too small, and it just burns too quickly and it's gone again. So something in the middle, 2 or 3 burning brightly, and I should have things about right. And you can see I'm using my peel to put those in position so they don't roll back across the floor. In this oven, 80 centimetre oven, I keep the fire at the back. I can have 2 pizzas at the front side by side, easy access, no problem at all. That's how I prefer to do it. Some people like to have the fire on the side, but I find this gives me a nice opportunity to cook 2 pizzas at once and not be leaning over one to get to the other. Okay, so those are now coming up to flame, nice and bright. And a good rule of thumb is if you can't see everything in the oven, it's not burning brightly enough. It should be clear as day in there. So I should be able to see exactly what's going on with my pizza, and I'll be up to the right sort of cooking temperature. So now I need to shape this pizza. I could of course roll this out, and that would give me one specific style of pizza. We're going to go for the hand-thrown style with a nice puffed up crust. So I want to start by sort of flattening the middle without flattening the outside. So I just use the tips of my fingers to press down and sort of working from the center out so that we're forcing all that air, if you like, into the outside crust. And I don't press the crust at all, so you can see how that's nicely raised up there. Using lots of flour so it doesn't stick to anything, to about that sort of size. Now I can do a bit of fancy throwing, or I could just sit it on my knuckles and stretch the dough, or I can pass it carefully from one hand to the other, making sure my hands cross at 90 degrees and that there's a bit of follow through which gives it some stretch. But by making sure my hands cross at 90 degrees, that means I stretch it one way, then I stretch it the other way, then I stretch it the other way, so it gets rounder, not longer and longer. Sleeves rolled up, watches off, rings off so it doesn't catch, and I can lay it on my forearm and it's not going anywhere. And then when I put that back down, you can see I've got a nice roundish pizza with a nice thin center that I can just sort of start seeing the color of the table through, but with still a noticeably raised crust. If I want to just tidy it up and round it off, I can stretch it out a little bit like that. And we've got a sort of 10, 11 inch pizza right there. So I can put this on my peel and top it and put it in the oven. I can put it on a board and top it and then transfer it to a peel and put it in the oven. What is slightly more challenging is to top it on the bench and then try and get it onto a peel, because it'll concertina. You know, if I'm really unlucky, I catch the outside and squidge it all up like that, or it just creases up in the middle, and that's not very good. If I've got a very flexible kind of professional grade peel, that's great, but most of us who are just making pizzas at home have one of these very simple flat aluminium peels. So I'm going to pop it on the peel. Some people like to put a little bit of semolina on there, and that makes sure it comes off the peel easily when it goes into the oven. But it also means that there's loose semolina on the floor of the oven, which you have to continuously sweep off and clean up, because it ends up burning on the base. So I don't tend to use that, and by using lots of flour in the shaping of the pizza, I find that dries everything off sufficiently that the pizza will come off the peel nice and easily without the use of any extra semolina. Just make sure that your peel doesn't get too warm. If you sit your peel in the oven and use the same peel to take out and turn as you use to put the pizza in the oven, it gets warm, and then as soon as the dough hits it, it starts to sweat and exude moisture, and then it sticks to the peel. So one peel to put it in, always cold. A second peel to turn it and take it out again. So we've got that on there. We need to get it into the oven. There's the spot that I want the pizza to go. So I could stand at the oven door and fire my pizza in there, and if I'm lucky, it will hit the spot. Most likely, it'll stop short or shoot past. In the event that it does hit the exact spot, it may well be that my toppings carry on and end up straight in the fire. If I'm rather timid about the whole affair and I sort of stand there and shuffle this off, I'll end up kind of concertinaing the pizza and it'll come out misshapen. We don't want to do that. So if this is my spot in the oven that I've decided is perfect for the pizza, I'm going to put the peel there, front of the peel, on the floor of the oven, and then I'm going to give a little shuffle forward and then bring that out completely under control. So I've placed the pizza exactly where I want it, and there's no element of luck involved. Okay, let's get topping. We're going to make a really simple pizza margherita. San Marzano tomatoes, which have been blitzed up and spread easily, a nice thin coating of those, making sure I don't sort of spread them over the crust, and not too much. Mozzarella cheese, break that up so it's nicely distributed across the whole of the pizza, not just a few blobs here and there. And a little bit of extra virgin olive oil is all it needs. I could add a little bit of seasoning, of course. Maybe we'll have a tiny bit of salt. And quite often you'll get a little bit of Parmesan cheese grated onto there at this point. That, of course, brings its own saltiness with it, and if you're making pepperonis or using salamis or anchovies, all of those bring their own salt. So then you wouldn't need to salt. You do need to think about what's going on, whether you need to add seasoning or not. Before you get too close to the oven, make sure this is moving. That's moving perfectly. So into the oven I go. Totally under control. So everything is looking perfect. I've got a nice bright fire burning. I can immediately see the cheese on top coming up to a sizzle, so I know I've got that grilling effect from above. And now I'm watching the crust rise, and of course one side is much nearer to the fire than the other, and cold air is being drawn in through the door to feed the fire. So one side is going to cook much quicker than the other, and I'm going to need to give the pizza a turn at some point. So once I see that that's nicely risen, I slide the peel into one side, lift it, pull it towards me, turn the pizza, pull it towards me, turn the pizza. If I've got all these elements right, so the floor temperature, the top temperature, nice thin crust, I should be looking at 90 seconds to cook the pizza. So it's had a turn, and now I can bring the whole thing out and just have a look. Tap the crust, see if the crust is coloured nicely, see if the crust has hardened up nicely, everything nicely bubbling, so I can consider that cooked. Some people, of course, like it a little more scorched around the outside. We can pop it back in for a little bit longer if that is the case. If I check the underside, I can see we've got a few brown speckles, but no black charcoal on the underside. And on top of that, some basil. If I cook it with the basil on it, the basil tends to sort of go rather black and unsavoury looking, so I like to put the basil on after it's come out. You might also find some recipes which say to grate some Parmesan cheese on at this point, or to add garlic oil or chili flakes or all sorts of things. But that is a simple classic margherita pizza, just tomato sauce, mozzarella cheese and basil. You can see that we've got a lovely puffed crust all around the edge. That's going to give us something to hold on to when we eat our pizza, but that doesn't mean it should be left on the side of the plate, because this dough, which is fermented for 18 hours, will be delicious in its own right. So why wouldn't you eat it? If I cut into it, we should find that if I pick up a slice, it droops somewhat. So to eat it, I want to fold the crust like that, and then just flip the tip over, and then I can eat my pizza just like that. If I rolled this pizza out so that it was even thickness and cooked it at a slightly lower temperature for slightly longer, it would support its own weight, or it would support more. So if I wanted a pizza with lots of things on it, I might choose to roll it out and have a thicker base. And you can see in the crust, we've got a lovely puffed open texture. And of course, it's delicious. So those are some of the ins and outs of shaping, topping and baking your pizzas. If you've enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel. There'll be a new video every week. We'll provide notes and recipes on our blog and a link to that below. Thanks for watching. See you next time.